How would you respond to those who challenge the premise that decarbonization can lead to growth and job creation? And can you share any examples that maybe come to mind?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Indeed, I think there are very concrete sectors that can demonstrate that decarbonization can be good business and good for the environment. And of course, I have one very concrete example that I would like to give, and that's the construction sector. The construction sector, from our perspective, is one that can really be decarbonized more easily than other sectors, number one. Number two, it generates around, in Mexico at least, 160,000 jobs per year. And the other thing is that the construction debris can become a very important element for circular economy. And the figures that I would like to share with you very quickly is that the greenhouse emissions associated, for example, with the production of cement are around 23 million tons of carbon equivalent and 32% of emissions from this industrial sector. So definitely we believe indeed that this sector in particular can be a very good example of decarbonization, and where I would say the associated sectors to the construction sector can also be decarbonized. So this is something that I believe we have selected 8 sectors really in Mexico that can be decarbonized, and this is what we are presenting in the national determined commitments. Residential, of course, linked to construction. Waste, which I think is another very key sector. In Mexico, we have 90% of the waste are disposed openly in open landfills, which is a disaster. So this is another way of generating and decarbonizing, actually, with methane, and we have to do that. I mean, and the President, Claudia Sheinbaum, has instructed us to put special attention on landfills that we can really recycle. For me, that's a very important industrial sector. And finally, I would say, of course, electromobility would be a perfect match. I don't know what's going to happen there, but maybe you can answer that question better than me.
I know what's going to happen.
I think so. Anyway, but in Mexico, we are putting a lot of interest, especially in public transportation, electrifying public transportation in Mexico City, for example. And this was done actually by our President, Claudia Sheinbaum, who was the mayor of Mexico City.
I know that you think a lot about access to affordable renewable energy, how we expand that, particularly in countries where we may have, limited infrastructure. How are you thinking about that?
Well, you see, the thing, I wanted to raise something related to the auto industry. And that is that, for example, in Mexico, we are working very closely with the car industry altogether, because we believe that to build up timeframes on how they can quickly move into hybrid. We are thinking more on hybrid rather than electromobility, because we believe that hybrid might be more efficient, because it's difficult to have the chargers everywhere. But the timing that we have been discussing together, government with industry, is 2027, to have more or less the auto industry in Mexico City, in Monterrey, and Guadalajara, at least these 3 big cities, to be ready for hybrid mobility. So I just wanted to make that point before raising the other one. Now, on energy transition, indeed, in Mexico, we have still, let's say, around 5 million people without electricity, which is not a big number, but it's a big challenge at the end of the day, because these are located in very far places. And many times for industry, it's not easy to get to those towns. Now, in Mexico, as you know, the electricity, for example, is a state-owned company, but it has been opened up by President Sheinbaum. 56% is going to be public, and the rest can be private investment. I think this will lower the prices quite a bit, because we need private-public alliances at the end of the day to bring down especially energy transition, especially renewables. We have a lot of places where Mexico can be very competitive in terms of solar, for example, in terms of wind or aeolic Basically, those two, I guess, are the most attractive ones, especially on the northern part of Mexico. But the other thing we are looking for is to start moving from oil, let's say, combustóleo, I don't know how to translate that, but anyway, move to cleaner energy within the fossil fuels, within the fossil fuels themselves. And this is something we have to do. We are a country that still relies a lot on fossil fuels. So at least how do we clean up those fossil fuels a little bit more? So, and at the end of the day, what we really need is to give access to people to lower the prices, which is the most, I would say, challenging thing we still have in a country that has so much inequalities yet in territorial terms and so forth. So that's the challenge, is of course to generate cheaper energy, no question about it, not at any cost. Of course, it should be renewable, preferably, and that's still too costly for many people.
Right.
That's the problem. Technology is not yet available, accessible as we would like it to be. We need definitely the participation of the private and the public sector to come together. The experience of the private sector on trains is very important for us right now. So we are engaging in, yes, the government is willing to pull in resources for infrastructure, no question about it. But the trains themselves, if they are going to be electric, it has to be private. And for example, in the Merida, in the Maya train, we are already working with 8 consortiums, 8 private consortiums, which are bringing all their experience in the trains, in the electricity, in la catenaria. How do you all this experience can be built in, because trains were forgotten in Mexico for many years. So now they're coming back. So we're bringing all these experience together. Now the Maya train is already 1,500 kilometers long, and it has been built in 3 years because of this private partnership with the government and 8 consortiums.